So maybe we can start with something simple. Like, can you tell me just a little bit? I've done my research, but what does WildBit do? And what do you do at WildBit?
Yeah, so WildBit is a software company that's been around for 19 years. I run it with my husband, Chris, private, bootstrapped, profitable. And we have products, subscription products, software as a service products that support other software development teams in various ways. We have an email product called Postmark that sends transactional, your application email. We have developer tools for collaborating on code, Beanstalk and Conveyor. So we've kind of been doing products for a really long time. And WildBit is kind of moving into what I'm calling our third iteration, WildBit 3.0, which is kind of looking at a larger ecosystem of what the purpose of the business is and the profits and how they contribute to overall humans that are part and around the business. So the founders, obviously, the employees, our customers, and our communities, and just looking at it as on a bigger scale, and like what types of products we build, what opportunities we create for the people on our team, for our customers, for our communities, to kind of make sure that the business is in existence for the right reasons.
Okay. Do you have doubts about that? Are you sort of concerned that the business is in existence for the wrong reasons, or maybe not very good reasons?
No, I think it's kind of it's more a philosophical question of like, what's next? So we've been doing this for a long time. So, it's just kind of a natural progression. We've been saying for the last maybe 5 or 6 years that WildBit exists for the team. We're product agnostic. We got very lucky in that the company started off doing consulting, and so products came secondary. So it wasn't a company that was organized around a particular idea. It was organized around more philosophy, right? And so the products have come and gone, and we've sold one, we've shut one down. Some are big, then become kind of stagnant, and others become big, and there's just a lot of movement over 19 years, but the team is the one consistent piece. And so the more that evolves and our view of it evolves, the more I'm convinced, and Chris is convinced, that really businesses are this thing that we as human beings create, and they exist for human beings. They don't exist for themselves, right? They are not a natural existence, right? We built them, we designed them. The only thing that's real is humans.
Yes, yeah. We invented them completely from.
So they should service us, right? So I think that's the key for me, is more putting our money where our mouth is and saying, okay, now how do we measure and value around that idea?
When you say they should service us,
yeah,
I'm assuming that you mean something different to service the shareholders, because shareholders are people, and a lot of companies serve their shareholders.
I look at the stakeholders, not the shareholders.
Okay, what's the difference?
To steal a little bit from B Corp, because I think they kind of nailed it. But the idea that there's multiple stakeholders, shareholders included, but there's multiple stakeholders, and we need to understand the impact on all of them. In my mind, they are the shareholders, which in this case is Chris and Natalie, right? The team, the employees, right? The customers, and how the impact on the customers, and the impact on the community surrounding the business, right? Whatever that community may be. And in our case, it's to some degree, it's a developer community, but I look at it a little bit broader in that, for me, it's the business community, right? What impact do we have on the larger business community? Are we providing a good example? Are we supporting others to do meaningful things? For our team, it's their own communities, right? Is WildBit enabling them to support their communities, whether that's their religious communities, their physical communities, their career and designers, customers, whatever those things are. Ultimately, it has to kind of encompass all 4 of those pieces. And every organization, my opinion is that every organization will emphasize different areas more than others. But if you only emphasize the shareholders, we see the ugly face that can show, especially when you get into bigger corporations where the shareholders are, theoretically anonymous, right? They're not real, right?
It's very hard to pin them down. Yeah.
Yeah,
very
exactly.
often other corporations,
Yeah.
and so on. Okay, so I want to dig into that a little bit later, but I want to sort of get to the core topic that I emailed you about, right? So the first thing I wanted to ask you was sort of a simple question, really, but we've never met. I kind of tried to get you to open my email by mentioning another mutual acquaintance, which seems to have maybe worked a little bit. But it would have been very easy for you to kind of, there's lots of good reasons or excuses for saying, oh, I don't know, Richard. I don't know much about this topic. It's Christmas is coming up, a bunch of things like that. Why did you say yes to talk about this topic publicly?
Um, I think these conversations are important. I don't know. It's for us internally, it's come up, and our environmental impact, or the impact of our work on the environment, is something that we are now actually currently in the process of measuring. We are, as part of our pursuit, well, we're looking into B Corp in particular because I like the foundation of where they're pulling from, and it gives a lot of real
Mm-hmm.
frameworks around building kind of intentional businesses. The first topic we tackled was the environment and
Okay.
our kind of environmental impact. So I think it's an interesting topic, but honestly, I think I get asked to do interviews all the time, and they're never about a specific topic like this. So it was kind of exciting to talk about it. Whether I have something valuable to add is
Okay.
questionable, but let's talk.
Okay, cool. So you said this has come up in your company, right? So, and you're starting to measure your environment, your environmental impact, or the way you put it was the impact of your work on the environment.
Right.
But how did this, how is this something that came up, between, is it like something driven by the leadership team? Is it a company-wide thing? How did it come up?
Sure. The B Corp certification in general is something that Chris and I started looking at about a year ago when I don't know if people are familiar with it, but it's run by a company called B Lab. And
Yeah.
the idea is that you can focus the company on kind of a double bottom line, which looks at, yes, profits, because they're businesses, and the more money we make, the more we can do better in the world, right? But also like what the impact of that money is, how is it being spent, what is the purpose of it. What's so interesting about B Corp is you kind of score yourself against a bunch of different criteria, different categories, and you don't need to be perfect in all categories because there's different, there's some
Mm-hmm.
businesses where all the profits go to charity, right? Not
Right.
everybody's going to be able to do that, but they can have massive impacts on human lives, right? In terms of really focusing on their employees. So there's a bunch of different
Yeah. Yeah.
categories. So we started a committee internally. Committees for us are where individuals can get together to work on a long-term project, and they don't have to be individuals in the same team. So it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be like the Postmark developer team or design team or whatever. And we started a committee to look at B Corp certification, and there's, like I said, there's a bunch of different categories. And a member of our team, Matt, he is very interested in the B Corp stuff. And when looking at it, he said, one of the areas that I'm very passionate about myself personally is our environment, like in the climate change in general, right? And humans' impact on the world. And I would love to start by tackling that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also one that I think we have the least transparency in internally. Like the other
Okay.
category, there's categories around employees and taking care of them. And I know we're going to score really well there. And I know we're going to score really well on customer impact. There's other areas where I kind of have confidence
Well,
in.
it's the stuff that you focused on maybe
Of
in the past,
course.
right? So
Exactly. Yeah.
you
And
know
this
it
one is
better.
something we have no idea. And then there is a part of me that's just naturally curious about what computing is doing from we could talk a lot about Bitcoin mining, right? That's everybody's favorite topic of like, oh, we're destroying the planet. Sure, 100%, but like, what about these data centers? Like what is,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I've
Well,
been to data centers. They are a scary part of the world. So it was just it's an interesting topic. We have no idea where it's going to go because we don't know how much of it we can actually control, and we have to really kind of dive deep in it. I don't know that we're going to. I know we scored poorly off the bat, right? And now we're looking at like what are the recommendations and what are the areas that we can start
okay.
working better towards. But it's one that I think there's a lot of work to be done.
Well, one thing that I can tell you is I'm not a climate scientist or anything, but I've had the same curiosity. One of the things I found out, which is quite shocking, is that currently the carbon footprint of the internet, the global internet, just the the running of it, right,
Yeah.
is comparable to global air travel. So and it's growing at a rate faster than global air travel, right? Because it was way smaller 10 years ago. So the rate is growing. And that's not even taking into account what a lot of these products are incentivizing in terms of, the sort of kinds of consumerism or habits that we might maybe want to rethink in some ways. But I don't want to get too much down that road just yet. What sort of things, so what are you doing now about it, right? So you've had this sort of scoring process, and you didn't score very well because you don't know much about what's going on. Fair enough. But what's the next step here? One of the things a lot of people that I speak to are sort of a bit concerned about is like, well, we want to do something, but what can a software company do? So what are you doing at the moment?
I don't know yet. No, honestly, I think what our first step is to start measuring it. And I mean, we're measuring things like, we have a Philadelphia co-working space right now that like it's our kind of like headquarters. People can come and go, and we're getting and we've somehow been able to figure out how much energy we're using in just our space, right? And everybody else works from home. We're trying to just define that, like get down to the nitty gritty. That's like almost like the easy stuff. The second part of that is what's the data centers doing and all of that stuff. So I don't know the answer. I think what we want to look at, and I'm pretty sure there's been more and more guidance, especially with companies like B Corp, who are starting to create recommendations and looking at things and seeing there's going to be some low hanging fruit. Like, I don't know, maybe the cleaning supplies they use here aren't great, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's going to be like, it can make an impact, but it's low hanging fruit, right? There's going to be bigger things that maybe we look at every individual team member's utilization in their spaces and seeing what we can do for that. Also manageable. The part that scares me and the part that I don't have an answer to is like, what will happen when we start looking at the infrastructure that runs these things that we build, right? Our vendors and what they're doing, and our other, and like,
so why does it scare you?
Because I don't know how much ability I will have to make change, or quickly, or the cost of that change, right? It's all like, the most of the world runs on Amazon's AWS, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are arguably maybe not the best company in the world, right? So like
that's a whole other podcast, but yes, yeah.
But right, so like, how do you, and those are the kind of things that it's arguably maybe simpler to find a new vendor
mm-hmm.
for your t-shirt processing for swag, let's just say, right? It would, I would argue, and it will be harder to find a comparable hosting provider that maybe has like a less of an environmental impact.
And by comparable, what do you mean here? You mean in price, or?
No, price is the least interesting to me. The computing power, the flexibility that, I run very technical products. We run infrastructure products that other people rely on. They are, Postmark is a product that is extremely expensive to run from just an infrastructure standpoint, because it's not a web app, right? It's a big piece of people's infrastructure. It handles tremendous amount of email and
mm-hmm.
input from other users and all that stuff. And so, we've built an entire infrastructure, like the entire product, to run on a certain infrastructure, using their tooling and their because it's fast enough, and because it can do the things that it needs to do. If some upstart that's trying to do better in the world, maybe, I don't know. And I don't, this is such hypotheticals, right? I did see that Matt, when he was doing some of his research, made a comment that says, surprisingly, being on Amazon helps. So there's, I guess, the alternative of when you host it, when you're all co-located, just having to share, being in a shared resource environment is actually having arguably less of an impact than even because we used to colo on our own. So
Okay.
there could
Oh,
be
I
an
see what you
interest,
mean. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
It's
So
sort
like
of like
I
everybody.
have my own box feeding power, right?
Okay.
Versus maybe I'm now on the same box with 30 other companies using the same amount of power.
Okay. It's a bit like getting the bus versus driving.
Yes.
Like that
Yes,
principle, right?
but don't quote me on that. Like that's, I think that's a very like a very early observation. We still have to dig deeper into what that
Yeah.
actually means.
Okay. But I guess the theory behind it is that doing stuff together can, if it's done right, can have better sort of maybe more manageable, I suppose, in some respect, right? You have one power source, one
Right.
place to cool and all this kind of stuff. Okay.
Yeah, I guess
So,
theoretically, yeah.
so have you dedicated resources to this? Like you mentioned Matt, for example, and a committee. If at this point, have you said, do you have goals set for the next year or a budget or, budget in terms of, either time, people, money? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so we have a budget set in terms of time and people. We don't know what anything's going to cost yet. And the goal right now is Matt will have done his research by the end of the year and then present it in January. And then we will come
Okay.
up with a game plan with goals. So you and I are talking right now. It is December, I don't know when, December 9th.
Ninth,
So
is it? I
yeah,
lost
December
track.
9th. So I don't know what we're going to see. I don't know what's going to be reasonable, and I don't know a timeline. But at WildBit, we don't look at things without doing something about it. So the expectation is there will be a list of recommendations, and just like anything else, we're going to look at them and say, all right, what can we do? What can't we do? What can we do immediately? What do we have to look at in the near future and the longer term future? And then put together a game plan.
Okay. So, I mean, that sounds great. And you mentioned also in your email that it would be great that you would be willing to share in a few months down the line, like what you find out. So that would be
Sure.
fantastic for sure.
Sure.
But to kind of bring it back to a personal level for a minute, where do where do you stand on the whole climate emergency, climate change kind of debate? Are you, there's this sort of spectrum of people from Trump at one end to Extinction Rebellion at the other end. Um, Everybody kind of saying different things. What have you synthesized? Are you worried? Are you? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Personally, it's something that in our home um, we talk a lot about, and arguably though we try to tackle things in ways that we like. I don't. How do I? Let me try to use better words. So we're building a second home, like a
Okay.
vacate, like in the country in the woods, and we're building the entire home off all public utilities, all resources, so that it has, and we're building a passive house so that it doesn't have, high need for heating and cooling and all that kind of stuff, and good windows. But we're
Got it.
also using a system that is also manufactured in a way that has a low carbon footprint. So the materials that they use, where they're sourced from, the way the thickness of the walls, all of that is actually using renewable materials. So as little polyurethane material as possible. We're using a lot of all natural materials, trying to source them very locally so that we're not shipping things from like
Got it.
China and Canada. So that's, but, and I only say that not to pat myself on the back. I say that because it's something that we genuinely care about. That to me is an easier decision to make because it was a decision we committed to it, and then it's just a matter of spending money on it, right? I can find the vendors to do it. And it's not changing my lifestyle in the way that maybe I would like to, but right now it's just not a priority to think about every day. Like sometimes I think, we try very hard not to have, plastic things in our home. We recycle, we do all these things. We have filtered water, so we don't buy water. We do things that we can, but I don't know that I have really stopped to make a drastic impact to our day-to-day life that's been painful, that maybe is in service to lowering our footprint.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's like a clear. I've seen people who really have like evaluated dramatically
So what
Are
sort
you,
of things do you mean? Like when you say like
like I'd love to
what
use Amazon less, right? Like I'd love to order less things on Amazon.
okay.
Right, like just the concept of like getting this one little thing delivered in a massive box on a truck
Yeah.
that came from God knows where. um
So
but
where do you what sort of stuff
yeah,
are you
because it's
buying?
convenience. I don't know, I have two kids, I live in, whatever, I don't know, like some random, like a filter that I can't buy anywhere else. I mean, that's the problem too, is like at some point we've gotten so reliant on these services that you can't even buy them locally anymore. Like I can't go and buy like this type of filter for my air conditioning unit because
Yeah,
it
yeah,
just
yeah.
doesn't exist locally. I have to buy it online. It has to get shipped from somewhere. So I think stuff like that. But overall, we at home, we have two kids, and we talk a lot about like running the water. Even though we have all LED lighting, we actually bought us funny. There's like a little device you can plug into um, your circuit board to see. That's not what it's called. Not a circuit board. Your
I know what you
switch.
mean.
Yeah, and it'll tell you what's
The
using
mains,
energy.
right? The main
Yeah,
the
yeah, 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 yeah,
main
exactly. I might have. Well, you
controls.
would have to
Yeah.
ask Chris. But he bought this cool device, and so now he can see like where we're using a lot of energy, and we have all LED lights, and we have like a couple places where we have little halogen lights, like kind of directional lights,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
holy shit, you see them like they turn on and like phew, so yeah, those kind of little things are like, okay, we can replace them, that's not hard, and so we just replace them, and doing stuff like that. But I still turn the air conditioning on when it's hot. It's not like I'm gonna say like, all right, well, let's just run around in shorts and tank tops. It's like, no, I'd like to be comfortable. So there's still, I can't say that I'm fully committed to, or or fully focused on
Yeah.
dropping my impact like to as low as possible.
Okay. Is that because you think it's not necessary, or because is it like it's urgent but not that urgent, or
No, I mean, I think, you know, I spend a lot of my time thinking about a lot of things that I think are having a positive impact on the world. And my thing is how to build a business that services these people. And my mind is always there, right? Like if I was, I look for ways to, I look towards others who are thinking about it all day long to give me ways to make sure that I have that impact, right? So
okay.
like I haven't driven a combustible engine car in, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, right? Make that easy for me. I want to buy it and I'm done with it, but I'm counting on other people to give me the opportunity to latch on to their work, because I'm focused my work in this other thing that I think is also having a positive impact on the world, but just in a different way. So it's a priority set, right? That's what I mean with the house. It was easy to build because I'm like, we're doing this we want a completely off the grid house. We want an environment. Find me the people that are going to do it, and let's go.
Right, because when you're starting something from scratch, it's kind of easier. It's a bit like if you build a new app nowadays, you're going to say, well, make it work on mobile devices, right?
Yeah.
It's almost, it's like a part of the checklist for a
Yep.
designer. Okay, so that's a pretty sort of common, I guess, way of thinking about things. So let me ask you a little bit about the business side of things, because one of the things I want to do with these interviews I'm doing is sort of also learn a little bit from the various different bits of expertise that people have about their own areas and how we can apply those things, sort of cross-pollinate some ideas. But I watched the talk that you did at Business Software. I'm not sure how long ago this was. It's a couple of years ago now. I watched the video. I wasn't there at the event, where you were talking about, well, about growth, or not needing, or this whole conversation. I'm probably paraphrasing your talk terribly, but really the point is to get you to talk about it. But it's a sort of conversation around what our business is for,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big conversation and debate that happens in certain environmental circles, many, around how a lot of the problems we face nowadays, not just climate related, but focusing on us for a minute, are directly related to the growth at all costs kind of approach that capitalism and venture capitalism has sort of espoused, right? And made almost a bit of an addiction for a lot of people. You know, I mean, a few years ago, it was fine to have $1 million company. Now, if you don't have $1 billion company, you suck, right? So I don't want to sort of like preach to the choir kind of thing, but what are your thoughts at the moment? Maybe a few years down the line from that talk, how do you think about running a business? What's it for?
I mean, listen, I think I'm upset. I'm a capitalist, right? So let's start there. I think
Okay.
Ray Dalio has been talking about this concept called conscious capitalism, which I'm very interested in, which is clearly capitalism in its natural form, the way we've designed it. Again, a human invention, we created it, does not make it natural law, and we make mistakes, is probably not fully formed yet, because the idea that if you let humans be responsible, we will put the money back into the system, blah, 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 and everybody thrives. And clearly that's not the case. Clearly we need some kind of government oversight or societal oversight, let's call it that, to make sure that bad humans or humans who aren't as thoughtful don't take advantage, right? So the way I look at business is as a tool to create value for human beings. Like, that is what it exists for. I think the problem is that in the current state, businesses by their nature, they are designed, I call it the beast, because it is designed to always want more, to be bigger and fatter. That is its natural state, is to grow, right? And there's never enough. And now I believe in growth because I think growth is how you ensure relevance, right? And you don't always grow, businesses plateau, but if you want to continue to provide value for the people around and in the business, then you need to make sure that you stay relevant and that you produce the right, something that's valuable. But it doesn't mean it has to grow at 300%, right? It has to grow for meaningful things. And I think that's what we've been focusing on with WildBit 3.0, is like, we need to define how big do we need to get to solve these things that we want to solve. And that, I think, is the difference, because right now what's happening is we're growing just for the sake of growing. We're growing for vanity metrics. We're growing because we have given away control of our businesses to all these other people who are not shareholders at all, right? They're just stakeholders. They have no connection to the product, the customer, or the community of that business.
Which people do you mean?
Well, I think, like, I run a software company, right? So like venture capitalism in its original form, I think it's changing a little bit now, but like venture capitalism in its original form, right, is designed. They sit outside of the other stakeholders, right? They sit as simply a shareholder. They sit right here, and they look at these businesses as it's almost it's like an average, right? So they don't look at them as individual businesses, right? They need some to succeed, most will fail, right? That's the formula. And so because they sit outside but they control the outcome, we have allowed these businesses to just run faster than they need to, for no reason other than to make somebody else rich. And so it doesn't and they're not bad people either, right? That's just their model. It's like, that's the model, is like, we throw these things out and see what sticks. And so I think that ability, or the inability to see an end or a purpose for money, for growth, that's a problem. And that is where we get really, really stuck. That is where you get these stories of founders who are driving their teams into the ground, right? All in the name of customer experience, and it's like, no.
Right, you're talking about the Away thing that
right,
just popped up recently, which
right.
I read. It was a very hard thing to read. Yeah.
Well, and I think the part of that, Away aside, like, I don't know her, I don't know that company. There's always three sides to a story. Fine. I think what was truly sad for me was that there was a lot of support of that type of behavior, because startups are hard, because markets demand a lot, because customers demand a lot. And I look at it and say that that's all bullshit.
Yes.
Because customers are humans, and and people are humans. And if the business serves, like, if you deliver a great suitcase at the cost of the human beings that nobody needed that suitcase. That was not that important. What is this market that you're supporting?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I noticed that myself, because because I saw a tweet about, so well. I mean, I don't get involved in tweet wars much if possible, but yeah, there was somebody calling out a few people who were defending that way of doing business, whether she fucked up or not. Right, it's kind of irrelevant because there seemed to be a lot of defense of, well, that's how you build a company,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
If she did that, it's fine because, of course, you need an 80, 90-hour week to build a great company by everybody on your team. But hey, you said at the beginning that, you very sort of unashamedly, you're a capitalist. But then you also mentioned something called conscious capitalism, which is not something I'm very familiar with. Tell me a bit about that.
So I'm not. This is not my theory. Ray Dalio, who from Bridgewater Capital, he has been doing a lot of writing. I think one of this concepts that he's come up with that I just really respect is this concept of conscious capitalism, in which he's basically just sharing that you have these, especially now, like these two polarizing sides, right? Like the one side who knows how to make money, the one side who knows how to spend money, but they don't know how to do the other part of the two, and you can't have one without the other. And that in order for capitalism to survive, we can no longer assume that all humans are good-natured enough to be able to, maybe good-natured isn't the right word, that we will naturally do the thing that capitalism is meant to do, which is put money back, right? Like spin it in a cycle, right? You make money, you give it back. People do, and you kind of spin it. And what we've seen over the last 30 years, 50, I think 30 years, whatever, is that the money's not going back, right? It's spinning up here in like a select group of people, and the numbers are, it's all there. He writes this beautiful thing. I'm an immigrant. I came to the United States as a refugee in 1989. With the idea that the American dream is the American dream, and all these things that I believe to be true, which is you can do better than your parents, and if you're poor, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps and all this stuff. And he, who's very obsessed with data, and I highly recommend reading this, basically looks at the data and says it's not true anymore in America. If you're born poor, you stay poor. If you
Was it ever true?
It was very much true. And they look at the data and they look at like generational success, right? And they look at, people born to poor parents and how they become middle class and how they compete, how, we've been continuing to build up, and that people born poor don't stay poor. And that was like the statistical truth. And all these things were true, but they have not been true for the last generation. And so you look at the data and you're kind of like, all these ideals, these values, and I'm a big proponent of values. Countries should have values, people should have values. And I look at these values that we believe to be true in America. And if you pulled an American on the side of the street, I would probably imagine they would say things like that. This is the American dream.
Yeah.
They are statistically no longer true. And they are no longer true, at least in his view and the way he looks at the markets. And he's arguably an extremely intelligent man who really understands history and markets and capitalism. He's looking at it and saying the reason it is no longer true is because capitalism did not work in its ideal form the way we've designed it, and it needs an iteration. And he looks at it, and there's something interesting around there, right?
Okay. What is the iteration that he's recommending there?
I think there has to be societal oversight. There has to be some requirements, right? There has to be requirements on the because he talks a lot about environmental impact too. Actually, you might want to look into his stuff as well. He talks a lot about that because he believes that we need to make changes on that as well. And he says like we have to force companies to do it if they're not going to do it themselves. We have to force companies to take care of the people. He's very welcoming of the stance that we should be focused on the stakeholders, not the shareholders, right? And what does that look like? And if we can't, if they're not going to do it themselves, we have to tell them to do it.
Okay. So it's a sort of, I guess, mesh or blend between capitalism to some degree and some degree of socialism, or sort of like governmental regulation. Right?
Yeah, I mean, societal regulation, right? And I say that because, you say socialism, people clam up. You say
I know.
Government, people clam up. And I just think I don't want to it's not about labeling it. It's about looking at it and saying the poorest capitalism, the reason we all are so excited about it, right? Or what got excited about it is like, oh, look, human nature, give people the ability to innovate. You let people make money. some people want to work like this and do this. Some people want to work like that. But if we can do it all together, it keeps flowing into the system, right? It feeds itself, and we all feed each other, and it looks really great. And we've done it for a while, and we've shown that maybe there's some tweaks that need to happen to it. Maybe we need to, it doesn't just naturally
sort of
flow that way.
The way that you're saying, like, we need some tweaks, sounds like, it's like it's a car with a squeaky wheel, right? But it's not that good, right? I mean, whether you look at it from an environmental perspective, from a earning employability kind of gap or a diversity point of view, there's some pretty big fuck ups that capitalism is responsible for.
Yeah, but humans have been fucking up things for a long time. We have a very short-sighted view. And if you look at the history of the human beings, we are living longer, we are healthier, we have less wars, we are innovative. There's a lot of stuff we're doing pretty good that you can actually directly tie to these changes that we made and how we innovate and how we work together and how we collaborate as a people. I agree with you. But I also, to me, I look at that all as opportunities for humans to continue to innovate and evolve. Like,
okay,
you're talking about diversity and inclusion and equality, and I agree with you. But holy shit, what did it look like 100 years ago? You're talking about 200 years ago. When we had slaves. It needs to move faster. I'm not arguing, but looking at it over a 50-year period versus a longer period, I think if you stretch that out, you see that overall we're moving in a pretty decent direction. Like I said, I came as a refugee in 1989. I'm Jewish. That we left Russia. I think there's arguably in a much better place now than my parents were 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the opportunities that this country provided were all a direct result of that. And so all of that. But I don't know that I would blanket state that capitalism is evil. I think we are dealing with some real issues, but humans have been dealing with issues for a long time.
I have this conversation quite regularly with my wife, because I wouldn't call myself a capitalist, but I'm also not an anti-capitalist, and I don't think that she's way more left-leaning in a lot of ways. So we have these kind of conversations because you tend to end up being like, oh well, a lot of capitalists and I know a lot of socialists, for example, right? And so you don't really get the other perspective very often. So I don't mean that, I don't think that I've very rarely met people who are genuine assholes, right? In our industry, in software,
I have. Sure.
I said, not never, but rarely, right? Sure. So there are a lot of good people around. Maybe, I don't know whether it's a majority or not. But there is certainly sort of I'm not going to say that an entire system is sort of rotten to the very core across all across everybody who's involved, because I don't think that's the case, but it deserves questioning nonetheless, right? So yes, we've improved a lot of things with a particular economic system. But if in the process we've, for example, disadvantaged certain other societies that we're not paying attention to, or as you're saying yourself, in the States now, you said there's less social mobility, right? So yes, maybe we've made progress over the last 50 or 100 years, but is it being reversed now? And how quickly is it going to be reversed?
I also think you have to remember that you're looking at social mobility in the United States over a smaller period of time too. Over the history of the United States, we lived a long time where there was no mobility either, right? We had to create unions, we had to do all these things, we had to move out of the industrial. There's longer periods of time. I think the struggle I have with the there are a lot of problems. I guess I just look at things. I try to look at things from a broader lens. These capitalists that create businesses are also doing things like something I've been paying a lot of attention to is remote work, is an innovation that has come out of, you know, arguably our industry, right, in a way that's creating and you don't realize the impact, but the impact is massive for people with disabilities. Like, they are now able to have jobs in ways they would not have been able to have jobs before, right?
Yes.
What is
Yeah,
right? What
that's
is
for
the impact
sure.
effect, right? So and it's a tiny
Yeah,
little
yeah, yeah.
thing, but like, there are more good stories to be told about this, and that's why I look at it as an iteration. Maybe it's not a squeaky wheel. Maybe it's a little bit more significant than that. Maybe it is. I don't know cars or engines or anything. I don't know.
Well,
But
actually,
like,
neither do I. But
I was like, I don't know. I don't know the right analogy, but I don't know that we need to like blow up the car,
okay.
right? Because I think that is a reaction that is good in order to make the right amount of progress. If we had a lukewarm reaction, we wouldn't make progress. We need to have a strong reaction to have people, you know, I think arguably what makes Ray Dalio's comments so interesting is because of his background as, like, my God, the quintessential capitalist. The man ran one of the largest hedge
Yeah,
funds in the world, right? Like, and for him to come out and say, we're not doing it right, right? I think is a very important, whether you agree with what he says implicitly or not, that's an important message to say, yep, there's work to be done, but we don't have to maybe go to the extreme to say, like, blow the whole damn thing up. But that could just be me too. I'm an immigrant, right? Like,
yeah.
capitalism is what brought me here. It's what allowed my parents. I mean, our first furniture was out of the trash. My dad's a doctor. My mom's a musician. Came to the U.S. with absolutely nothing. All of the mattress I slept on was out from somebody else's trash, right? That's where we came from. Now, you know, I run a successful business. My parents were both entrepreneurs eventually. That's capitalism, right? That's how you
Yeah.
did that. So you won't see me go like, you know, blow it up. But I think there's massive
No,
changes that need to be
no,
made.
and I'm not a blow it up kind of person in any way. So I don't think I would make that case. But you know, somebody like Ray Dalio, he's unlikely to ever advocate blowing it up anyway, because he has
Fair.
been served very, very well by it, right?
Sure.
So there is that kind of like side to bear in mind when listening I'm not familiar with his work, so I'm gonna, you know, this is one of the things I'll do as part of following up on this. We're coming up to an hour, and I don't wanna take up too much of your time, so I'll ask you one last small thing, and then we can wrap it up there. But one of the things that made me want to start talking to some people about this in our industry in software. You know, my background is all like in software, mostly SaaS in the last few years. Is that I haven't seen much talk about these issues in software circles. By which I mean just generally within companies, at tech events, meetups, and so on. There's the occasional like tech for good meetup once a year, you know, in sort of like the local product tank kind of thing. But you don't see this, you know, we mentioned you speaking of business software before. It's not a topic there. It's not a topic at the big events. You know, should it be? Why isn't it a topic there? Would you want to hear about this stuff if you're attending an event like business software or similar events?
I mean, when you say I mean, I agree with you. It's probably not a topic that maybe is at these events. And sure, I mean, we plan to share all of our findings publicly so that, you know, if others can learn from some of this stuff, I think that would be super cool. And maybe, you know, I'd love to learn from others as well. So I think you're right. I don't know. I don't think it's intentional. I just think that there is. It's a it's a topic that's harder to negotiate without having more experts tell you what to do. Like, I truly, like, there's something like, you know, if somebody came out and said,
Mm-hmm.
hey, SaaS businesses, these vendors you're using, you know, these are some ways in which to lower your carbon footprint by doing these four things, right?
Okay.
I think they would do. You see big companies doing things that are easy or that have been defined, like buying back their fuel, you know, for flights. Like
Mm-hmm.
I forget what you call that, right? When you can like buy back, like when they do corporate travel, they buy back their
Carbon offsetting.
Yeah, carbon offsetting or something like that, right? Like that's a thing. Like you can tell a company, hey, you do this, you pay for it. That's how you and awesome, right? And they're like, okay, good, we'll do that. So the more we can create around giving those tools, because you're asking people to sit there, like what we're doing right now is like digging really deep, trying to figure out, we're kind of in no man's land. We're not really sure what information or resources we're going to have. We need to really figure out ways to do it. If you want to make an impact, you start creating companies and experts to say, like, here's 3 things you can do, here's 4 things you can do, here's this you can do. And I can definitely see it becoming more prolific if we just had more of those companies, those expertise, right, around making those things happen.
Is there appetite for that kind of stuff? I mean, is this a topic that comes up in, I don't know whether you attend like many conferences or not, and, speaking to other CEOs of maybe similar or larger companies, would people even be interested? Do they give a shit? Or are we sort of...
Right, of course they give a shit. I mean, you have, if you're, I would be shocked to find companies that care about their employees, care about their customers, and don't care about other things like the environment. It's just that they're maybe like us, like focused on their areas in one way. If I could probably bring together a conference full of 100 companies that I know personally that would absolutely be like, what can we do? Right? Because they personally care. And I know that internally companies, like I have, a lot of friends who run startup companies, and they have all kinds of policies internally of like things you can touch, right? The cleaning supplies, the travel schedules, the don't print shit, right? Don't don't drive, don't, take public transportation. We'll pay for that. They do all these things internally. But that's just company stuff, right? The impact of technology is a trickier one, and there's just not a lot of it being talked about. But I think they would do it if there was more resource that said, like, here's ways you can help.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Of course.
I would love to follow up with you or with Matt about what you find out in a few months,
Totally.
in a few months' time. Hello, me again. Thank you for listening to the episode. I hope that was as interesting and useful for you as it was for me. As always, I encourage you to visit our website, fatalair.blog, to subscribe to our mailing list and find other ways to contribute and help us support the project. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.